The university lawn was a sea of navy blue caps and gowns, a vibrant, shifting ocean of achievement under the brilliant June sun. I clutched the small bouquet of white lilies I had bought for Emily, her namesake flower, a tradition we'd kept for every birthday and milestone. Their sweet fragrance, usually a source of comfort, now felt sharp, almost piercing, as it mingled with the overwhelming emotions of the day. My daughter. My brilliant, resilient Emily was about to graduate from college. From my seat in the third row, a spot I'd claimed 2 hours early, I could just make out the back of her head, her dark, glossy hair pinned neatly beneath her tasseled cap. A lump formed in my throat, a familiar, painful, beautiful mixture of pride, nostalgia, and the bittersweet ache of time passing far too quickly. For 12 years, it had been just the two of us against the world, an unwilling duo, forged in the fires of abandonment. I had poured every ounce of my being into raising her, into making sure she never felt the cavernous void left by a family that was supposed to be whole. I remembered the nights I'd come home, my feet aching from a double shift at the diner, only to find a 7-year-old Emily struggling with a diorama of the solar system. I'd pushed aside my exhaustion, sat with her on the floor with glitter and glue, and helped her hang Saturn's rings until my eyes burned. I remembered every scraped knee, every school play where I was the only parent in the audience, cheering loud enough for two. I was her rock, her confidant, her tireless cheerleader, because I had to be. There was no one else. Seeing her there on the cusp of launching into her own future felt like the culmination of every sacrifice, every quiet tear shed into my pillow after she'd finally fallen asleep. The keynote speaker began his address, his voice a polished, predictable drone of inspirational quotes about finding one's path. I listened with half an ear, my mind drifting back. I remembered the day I brought Emily home from the hospital, a tiny 7-pound bundle wrapped in a yellow blanket. My own mother, Catherine, had been there. She decorated the nursery, her laughter echoing through our small apartment as she hung a mobile of smiling felt stars. She was more than a grandmother. She was the vibrant, warm center of our small universe. She baked oatmeal cookies that smelled of cinnamon and love, and she told the most fantastical bedtime stories, her voice weaving magic into the twilight hours. Then came the day that magic shattered. It was a Tuesday in April. Emily was 6, home from school with a slight fever. Catherine was supposed to be there. I came home from work to a silent house. Emily was asleep on the sofa, a tear track dried on her flushed cheek. And on the kitchen table, a single sheet of notepaper, weighted down by a salt shaker. The note was a monument to cowardice. Claire, I need to find my own life. I can't be just a mother and a grandmother anymore. I'm sorry. Don't look for me. Catherine. That was it. No real explanation, no forwarding address, no phone number. Just a gaping hole where a person used to be. My first reaction wasn't sadness, but a frantic, disbelieving rage. I called her phone. It went straight to a disconnected message. I called her closest friends, their voices a chorus of strained, unconvincing ignorance. It was as if she had orchestrated her own vanishing. The first few years were a blur of bewildered grief. Emily's constant, heartbreaking questions were a knife in my heart. Is Grandma mad at me? When is she coming home? She would whisper at night, her small body trembling with a sorrow she couldn't comprehend. How do you explain to a child that the person who was their son had simply chosen to set, leaving them in a cold, bewildering darkness? Eventually, the questions tapered off, replaced by a quiet, guarded caution. The name Catherine became a forbidden word in our home, a ghost we never acknowledged. I built a fortress of love and routine around Emily and me, a sanctuary for two where the shrapnel of abandonment could not touch us again. And we had thrived. Emily had blossomed into a compassionate, intelligent, and fiercely independent young woman, her spirit uncrushed. She was everything I could have ever hoped for. My attention snapped back to the present as the dean of students began calling the names of the graduates. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of anticipation. Emily Carter! The announcement rang out, clear and proud. I surged to my feet, my hands trembling so much I could barely operate my phone to record the moment. She walked across the stage, her smile radiant, a beacon of pure, unadulterated joy. She shook the dean's hand, accepted the diploma, the culmination of 4 years of her hard work and 12 years of mine. For a fleeting, perfect second, her eyes found mine in the crowd. She gave me a small, private wave, a secret gesture between us that said, "We did it." And in that moment, all the years of struggle, of loneliness, of quiet desperation, they all melted away. leaving only an incandescent pride that burned brighter than the summer sun. The ceremony concluded, the air filled with the sound of 1,000 triumphant cheers as caps were flung high into the sky, a final, joyful salute. The graduates broke apart, finding their families in a chaotic, beautiful mess of hugs and tears and photographs. I began to make my way through the throng, the lilies held protectively against my chest, my eyes scanning for Emily's familiar, smiling face. And then I saw her, standing near a large, ancient oak tree at the edge of the lawn, a figure I had not seen in person for 12 years. She was older, of course, but unmistakable. Her hair, once a rich auburn, was now a chic, silver bob. She wore an expensive-looking linen suit, a stark contrast to the faded floral dresses I remembered. The lines around her eyes and mouth were deeper, etched by a life lived entirely apart from us. It was her, Catherine, my mother. She stood with a tense, hesitant posture, clutching a designer handbag like a shield, her gaze fixed on the spot where Emily was being swallowed by a group of jubilant friends. Time seemed to warp and bend, the happy sounds of celebration fading into a dull, distant roar. My feet felt nailed to the grass, my blood turning to ice in my veins. A violent storm of emotions crashed over me. Rage, white-hot and blinding. Then a wave of grief so profound it threatened to buckle my knees. After 12 years of absolute soul-crushing silence, she chose now? Today? It felt like a violation, a desecration of this sacred moment that belonged only to me and to Emily. For a long moment, I was paralyzed, a statue carved from ice and fury. Every instinct screamed at me to turn, to grab Emily, and to run before she could see the ghost that had materialized at the edge of our perfect day. But my feet wouldn't move. My gaze was locked on Catherine. I watched as she took a tentative step forward, her eyes, the same shade of hazel as Emily's, scanning the crowd with a nervous energy. She wasn't looking for me. She was looking for Emily. The realization struck me like a physical blow. She hadn't come here for reconciliation. She had come to insert herself into the victory, to claim a piece of the success she had done nothing to nurture. A fire ignited in my chest, burning away the shock and leaving pure, unadulterated rage in its wake. I started moving, not towards Emily, but towards Catherine. Each step was heavy, deliberate, a drumbeat of resentment on the manicured lawn. The happy sounds of the celebration seemed to warp and distort around me, the laughter of other families turning into a mocking chorus. She saw me when I was about 10 feet away. A flicker of recognition, then of panic, crossed her face. She visibly braced herself, her grip tightening on her expensive leather handbag. Up close, I could see the fine web of lines that life had spun around her eyes and mouth. She wore a perfume I didn't recognize, something expensive and floral that felt like an assault on my senses. The cheap, sweet scent of the lilies in my hand was a stark reminder of the world she had abandoned. "Claire," she breathed, her voice raspy, unfamiliar. "What are you doing here, Catherine?" I kept my voice low, a venomous whisper. I refused to make a scene, refused to give her the satisfaction of a public drama. This moment was still Emily's, and I would protect it with everything I had. I wanted to see her graduate. "I'm so proud," she stammered, gesturing vaguely towards the throng of students. "Proud?" The word came out as a choked, incredulous laugh. "You don't get to be proud. Pride is earned. It's earned in the sleepless nights, the parent-teacher conferences, the flu-ridden days, and the scraped knees. It's earned in the 12 years of silence you left us with. You don't get to show up on the finish line and claim a medal for a race you never ran." Her face paled. "I know you're angry." "Angry?" I took a step closer, my body thrumming with a righteous fury I hadn't felt in years. "Angry doesn't even begin to cover it. You don't exist in our world. You haven't for 12 years. You are a ghost, a bad memory. So I'm going to ask you one more time, what are you doing here?" I wanted to explain. "I don't want your explanations," I hissed. "And more importantly, Emily doesn't need them. She has a life, a good life, that we built without you. You don't get to just walk back into it and disrupt everything." Just then, a joyful voice cut through the tension. "Mom, there you are." My blood ran cold. I turned, and there was Emily, weaving her way towards us, her diploma clutched in one hand, her face flushed with happiness. Her smile faltered slightly as she took in the scene, her eyes moving from my rigid posture to the unfamiliar, elegantly dressed woman standing before me. "Mom? Who's this?" Emily asked, her brow furrowing in confusion. She looked at Catherine, a polite but distant curiosity in her eyes. There was no glimmer of recognition. To her, this was just a stranger, A friend of her mother's, perhaps. A profound, aching sadness pierced through my anger. My mother was a stranger to my daughter. I saw Catherine's face fall, the hope that had flickered there moments before now extinguished. She had expected to be known, to be remembered. The reality of her long absence was suddenly, cruelly laid bare. I took a deep breath, the air feeling thin and sharp in my lungs. I had a choice. I could lie, create a plausible story, and usher this woman away, preserving Emily's day and our peace. Or I could tell the truth. For 12 years, I had protected Emily from this woman's ghost. Now the ghost was here in the flesh, and a lie felt like another form of betrayal. Emily was an adult now. She deserved the truth, however ugly. My voice was flat, devoid of emotion, as I spoke the words I never thought I would say again. "Emily," I said, my eyes locked on hers, trying to silently convey a universe of warning and support. "This is Catherine, your grandmother." The name hung in the air between us, heavy and toxic. Emily's eyes widened, her smile vanishing completely. She stared at Catherine, truly seeing her for the first time. I could see the gears turning in her mind, connecting this strange, silver-haired woman to the black and white photos from a life she barely remembered, to the whispered stories of a grandmother who had loved her and then vanished. Her gaze flickered back to me, her eyes filled with a storm of questions, hurt, and confusion. Catherine, seeing her opening, took a step forward, her hands outstretched. "Emily," she said, her voice thick with a manufactured emotion I didn't trust. "You are so beautiful. I have dreamed of this day." Emily flinched, taking an involuntary step back, closer to me. It was a small movement, but it was everything. It was a choice. She looked at the strange woman, then back at me, her anchor in this sudden, bewildering storm. "Mom?" she whispered, her voice small, her radiant joy from moments before completely gone, replaced by the bewildered pain of a 6-year-old child all over again. I stepped slightly in front of her, a human shield. "This is not the time or the place, Catherine," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. "You made your choice 12 years ago. You don't get to make another one today." Catherine's face crumpled, a mask of practiced sorrow. "Please, Claire, just 5 minutes. That's all I ask. For her." She looked at Emily, her eyes pleading. It was a calculated move, an attempt to paint me as the unreasonable gatekeeper, the bitter daughter denying a repentant grandmother a moment of connection. But Emily's hand found mine, her fingers lacing through my own. Her grip was tight, a silent affirmation of solidarity. "Mom," she said, her voice steadier now, though the hurt was still evident in her eyes. "It's okay. I think I want to hear what she has to say." Her words surprised me. I looked at her, searching her face for any sign of wavering, but found only a grim, newfound resolve. This wasn't the joyful, carefree graduate from half an hour ago. This was a young woman staring down the ghost of her own past. She was no longer a child to be shielded. She was an adult, making a choice, and I had to honor it. "Not here," I said, my voice sharp. I looked around at the dispersing crowd, the happy families posing for photos. The thought of their joy being the backdrop to our tragedy was unbearable. "We'll go to the cafe down the street. You have 10 minutes. I didn't wait for Catherine's agreement. I kept hold of Emily's hand and started walking, leading her away from the celebration, away from the life we had so carefully constructed. It felt like a retreat, a surrender. Catherine followed us, a silent shadow at our heels. The short walk was thick with unspoken words. I could feel Emily trembling beside me, could feel the weight of Catherine's presence behind us. The lilies in my hand suddenly felt heavy, their petals starting to wilt. The cafe was a small, quiet place with dark wood tables and the soothing aroma of coffee and old books. We chose a booth in the back corner, a small island of forced intimacy. Emily and I sat on one side, Catherine on the other. The vinyl of the seat felt cool and slick beneath me. For a moment we just sat in silence, a tableau of past and present colliding. The waitress came, a cheerful young woman who seemed oblivious to the storm cloud of misery hanging over our table. We ordered 3 coffees we would never drink. As soon as the waitress left, Catherine started. "I know what you must think of me," she began, her gaze fixed on Emily. "There hasn't been a day in 12 years that I haven't thought about you, that I haven't regretted the pain I caused." I let out a short, bitter laugh. Regret is a convenient word. It costs nothing. Catherine flinched but kept her focus on Emily. "When you were born, Emily, it was the happiest day of my life, and for 6 years being your grandmother was my world. But it was consuming me. I had married young, had Claire Young. I never had a life that was truly my own. I looked in the mirror one day and saw a woman I didn't recognize, a woman who was only mom or grandma. I was disappearing. Emily, who had been staring at the tabletop, finally looked up. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the cafe's gentle murmur like a shard of glass. "So you left? You just disappeared? Because you were bored?" "It wasn't boredom," Catherine insisted, leaning forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "It was desperation. It felt like a matter of life and death, a choice between my sanity and my role. I know it was selfish. God, I know it was selfish. But I had to save myself. I moved to Boston. I went back to school. I have a new life, a career. I'm a landscape architect." She said the last part with a touch of pride, as if offering a successful career as a balm for a childhood of abandonment. The casual mention of a whole new life, a city, a school, a job we knew nothing about, was a fresh stab of betrayal. She hadn't just vanished, she had replaced us. "Good for you," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You built a new life on the foundations of the one you destroyed." "That's not fair, Claire." "Fair?" My voice rose, and a man at a nearby table looked over. I lowered it to a strained whisper. "You want to talk about fair? Let's talk about the nights Emily cried herself to sleep asking why her grandma didn't love her anymore. Let's talk about the birthdays and Christmases you missed. Let's talk about me working 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads while you were in Boston, finding yourself." "Don't you dare talk to me about fair." Tears welled in Catherine's eyes. They looked real, but I couldn't bring myself to trust them. "I sent letters," she said, her voice cracking, "and gifts to your old post office box for years. They all came back, unopened." I stared at her, my mind reeling. A P.O. box. I had closed it a year after she left, tired of paying for an empty box, a symbol of a hope I no longer had. The thought that she had tried to reach out, even in such a cowardly, indirect way, sent a confusing jolt through my anger. But it was too little, too late. Emily spoke again, her eyes fixed on Catherine, her expression unreadable. "Why now? After all this time? Why today?" This was the question, the real question. Catherine's composure seemed to crumble completely. The carefully constructed facade of the regretful, successful woman gave way to something more raw, more desperate. She took a shaky breath. "Because I'm sick, Emily. I have a genetic heart condition. The doctors say, well, they say my time is limited, and the condition is hereditary. It can be passed down through the maternal line." She looked from Emily to me, her eyes wide with a fear that was finally, undeniably real. "I came today because I had to tell you both. You and your mother need to be tested." The words hung in the sterile air of the cafe, heavier and more suffocating than any silence had ever been. A genetic heart condition. Hereditary. The world tilted on its axis. The anger that had been my armor for 12 years suddenly felt flimsy, useless against this new, terrifying enemy. This wasn't about betrayal anymore. This was about biology, about the silent, invisible legacy passed down from mother to daughter. My first thought was a flare of pure, hot suspicion. How convenient. What a perfectly crafted, emotionally manipulative bombshell designed to blast through any defense. A deathbed confession that was also a warning, a tactic so potent it was almost brilliant in its cruelty. I opened my mouth to say as much, to accuse her of this final, desperate lie. But then I looked at her, really looked at her. The practiced sorrow was gone, replaced by a raw, undisguised fear. The skin under her eyes was tinged with a faint bluish shadow, a detail I hadn't noticed before. The hand resting on the table had a slight tremor. This wasn't a lie. The chilling realization settled in my bones. This was real. Emily was the first to speak. Her voice, when it came, was unnervingly calm, stripped of the earlier hurt. It was the voice of the intelligent, pragmatic young woman I had raised. "What is the condition called?" she asked, her gaze unwavering. Catherine seemed taken aback by the directness of the question. "It's called arrhythmogenic cardiomyopathy. ACM," she said, the clinical term sounding alien and brutal. It affects the heart muscle. It can cause dangerous arrhythmias. My father had it, but we never knew. He died of a heart attack when he was 50. The doctors think it was a misdiagnosis. A ghost of a memory surfaced. My grandfather's sudden death, the shock, the swiftness of it all. It had been written off as the result of a stressful life. Now, that family tragedy was recast in a horrifying new light. "You've known about this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. For how long? Catherine's gaze dropped to her trembling hands. I was diagnosed 2 years ago. I was in denial. I started treatment, but I didn't want to believe it was as serious as they said. Then a few months ago, things got worse. My doctors urged me to inform my family. To inform you. 2 years. She had known for 2 years. For 2 years, she had carried this knowledge, this ticking bomb, while we lived in blissful ignorance just a few states away. The anger, which had momentarily subsided, came roaring back, but it was a different kind of anger now. It was colder, heavier. You knew for 2 years that we could be at risk. And you did nothing? I asked, the accusation hanging between us. You waited until you were at death's door to grace us with this information? What if it was too late for us? What if Emily? I couldn't finish the sentence. The thought was a physical pain, a vice squeezing my chest. I was afraid, Catherine whispered, tears finally spilling down her cheeks, real and hot. I was a coward. I knew that the moment I told you this, I would have no more excuses. I would have to face you, to face what I did. And I couldn't bear it. Every day I told myself, tomorrow. And tomorrow never came. Until I realized I was running out of them. Emily reached across the table and took my hand. Her hand was warm, steady. It was a gesture of quiet strength that said, I'm here, we're here, together. She looked at Catherine, not with forgiveness, but with a profound and weary sadness. Write it down, Emily said. The name of the condition, the name of your specialist, everything we need to know. Catherine fumbled in her expensive handbag, her hands shaking so much she could barely open the clasp. She pulled out a pen and a small leather-bound notebook. She scribbled on a page, tore it out, and pushed it across the table. Her handwriting was a frantic, spidery scrawl. We stood to leave. There was nothing left to say. The coffee sat on the table, untouched and cold. Catherine remained in the booth, a solitary, diminished figure. As we turned to go, she spoke my name one last time. Claire. I stopped but didn't turn around. The lilies, she said, her voice choked. They were your grandmother's favorite flower. That's why I always bought them for you. The piece of information, a memory I didn't even know I had, was a final, tiny pinprick to my heart. I said nothing. I squeezed Emily's hand and walked out of the cafe, leaving the ghost of our past sitting alone with her regrets. We walked back out into the brilliant sunshine of the afternoon. The world looked the same, but everything was different. The joyful sounds of the graduation celebration had faded. The day's triumph had been irrevocably tainted, overshadowed by a future that was suddenly uncertain. My daughter, who had just been on the cusp of a limitless future, was now facing a question mark, a genetic inheritance she never asked for. We didn't speak on the walk back to the car. What was there to say? When we got in, I turned to look at Emily. Her face was pale, but her eyes were clear. The diploma lay on the back seat, its leather cover seeming trivial now. The wilting bouquet of lilies was on the dashboard, their sweet scent now a cloying reminder of the day's bitter turn. I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. Emily, I'm so sorry, I whispered. Today was supposed to be about you, about your success. She ruined it. Emily shook her head. She reached over and put her hand on my arm. She didn't ruin it, Mom. She just changed it. She paused, then gave me a small, sad smile. You always said it was just the two of us against the world. Looks like we have a new world to face. I looked at my daughter, at the incredible young woman she had become, not in spite of the broken pieces of her childhood, but perhaps because of them. She was strong, she was resilient, and she was mine. Catherine's return had not broken us. It had simply thrown a new, terrifying challenge in our path. I started the car, and we drove away from the university, away from the life we had known. The note with Catherine's doctor's information sat on the console between us, a flimsy piece of paper holding the weight of our future. I didn't know what the test would show. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever came next, we would face it together, just the two of us.